I've been with the security company for almost 7 years. With that tenure, I've earned enough seniority to choose my own shifts and avoid the worst hours. Plus, I have more certifications than most of my colleagues: advanced tactical defense training, firearms handling, and intruder response protocols. Recently, we took on a new contract to guard an old railroad depot that the government reactivated for temporary storage of emergency communication equipment. The place is extremely isolated. I won't reveal the exact location, but to give you an idea, it's over 10 kilometers from the nearest highway, in the middle of an arid plain, surrounded by sparse brush and abandoned tracks that vanish into the horizon. The main building is a 2-story concrete warehouse with thick walls and narrow windows, almost like gun slits. Around it, a 4-meter-tall barbed wire fence reinforced with rusted metal posts. There's only one entrance, a heavy steel gate controlled by code that leads to a potholed dirt road. That road connects to the main highway after about 12 kilometers of curves and dust. There are no houses, gas stations, or even cell towers nearby. It's just you, the wind, and silence. Because of my seniority, I usually work daytime shifts and have weekends off, but a few months after we started the contract, we began losing guards on the night shifts, especially on Saturdays and Sundays. Some said they heard noises coming from the tracks at night. Others simply never came back. The daytime team had 3 people. The weekday night shift had 2. On weekends, however, it was just 1, and with all the dropouts, we ended up with no one. My supervisor called me on a Thursday night. He asked if I could cover Saturdays and Sundays until they hired replacements. I could have refused. In hindsight, I should have said no. But I was saving up to renovate my grandmother's house, the one I grew up in, near Harrison, and the overtime pay was generous, so I accepted. The first 2 weeks were quiet, nothing out of the ordinary, just the sound of the wind hitting the metal roof panels and the occasional creak of the cooling rails at night. I spent the hours checking systems, doing rounds every 2 hours, and when alone, watching old movies on my phone or playing on my Game Boy, as I always did on solo shifts. It was on the 3rd Sunday that everything changed. It was around 1:45 a.m. A thin fog covered the ground and the air was damp, almost sticky. I was in the monitoring room on the 2nd floor. The room has a small window facing the west side of the perimeter, right where the tracks run closest to the fence. Inside, 3 monitors displayed the internal cameras and 2 external ones, one at the main entrance and another at the back, near the generator. I had the lights off, as I always do, to avoid drawing attention, when I started feeling drowsy. I got up to stretch and walked down the hall to the snack machine to grab an energy drink. Before leaving, I stopped at the window and peeked through the blinds. The mist made everything blurry, but the rails gleamed faintly under the moonlight. That's when I saw, or thought I saw, a shadow moving between the tracks, about 20 meters from the fence. I froze, holding my breath. I waited for another moonbeam to confirm or dismiss what I had seen. Nothing moved. I figured it was fatigue. My mind, trained to stay alert in empty spaces, was inventing threats where none existed. I went to the machine, bought a cold can, and drank it all in one go. I returned to the room in less than 5 minutes. As soon as I walked in, I noticed the rear camera was offline. I went to the window and saw. The unit was hanging by its cables, swaying slightly in the wind. I assumed the mount had given way due to moisture or rust. I logged the failure in the night report and returned to my post. About 10 minutes passed. I was watching a movie on my phone, when suddenly the access system emitted an alert tone, that sharp sound indicating someone was entering a code on one of the external keypads. I looked at the main screen. The system showed someone using the keypad on the side door, the one leading to the loading area near the tracks. My whole body went rigid. First the shadow, then the camera knockdown, and now someone entering the code. And not just any code, The system showed a green light. Access granted. That meant the person had the correct code. But who? No staff were authorized for that weekend, and I was the only guard scheduled. I grabbed the landline on the desk to call the police. Deadline. I checked my cell phone. No signal, as always happens out there. I decided I needed to get out of there. Maybe in the lobby, closer to the entrance, I'd get a signal. I left the monitoring room and entered the dark hallway, lit only by the red emergency lights on the ceiling. As I walked, I kept checking my phone, hoping for a signal bar. That's when all the building lights went out. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the server hum stopped. I knew the backup generator should kick in within 30 seconds, but in that moment, all I could think was, he cut the power. And if he did, he's probably in the basement, where the main panel is. Since the basement was right below the lobby, and I was on the second floor, I decided to run to the emergency stairwell, go down to the ground floor, then exit through the main gate and head straight to my truck, which was parked just a few meters from the entrance. I opened the stairwell door. Inside, it was almost pitch black, except for a faint light coming from the floor below. I started descending slowly, trying not to make noise. My footsteps echoed softly in the concrete shaft. I reached the first floor when I heard a door open downstairs, on the ground floor, near the exit to the yard. I froze. In that instant, I remembered I was armed. I'd gone through dozens of simulations, trained in confrontation scenarios, but never in anything real. And there I was, alone, in the dark, with someone who knew the code and had knocked down a camera. I felt a fear no training had prepared me for. I didn't know if I could shoot. I prayed I wouldn't have to. As I stood there, listening to my own breathing, I started hearing heavy footsteps climbing the stairs. I didn't hesitate. I changed my plan right then. Instead of going down, I'd go back up to the second floor and use the roof hatch. Up there, among the signal antennas and ventilation ducts, I could hide until he gave up or the power came back. I turned and started climbing the steps as fast and quietly as possible. But as I passed the second floor landing, my gun clanged loudly against the metal railing. The footsteps stopped immediately. I was paralyzed. My heart pounded so hard it seemed to echo in the stairwell. After a few endless seconds, I heard someone running up the stairs, fast, furious. I bolted. I took the steps two at a time, as if my life depended on it, because in fact it did. When I reached the top, just before opening the door to the hallway, I had an idea. I shoved the door hard, let it slam against the wall, and released the handle. The door shut with a loud thud. I kept running to the roof access ladder, a foldable metal structure mounted on the hallway wall, and climbed up quickly. That way, he'd think I'd fled down the corridor. I heard the stairwell door open. He ran in without looking up. The door closed behind him. That was my chance. I leapt off the ladder from a height of almost 3 meters and landed with a dull thud on the hallway floor. I sprinted towards the main stairs, now racing down as fast as I could. He surely heard me. I'd barely reached the first floor when the door opened again and his footsteps pounded after me. We both ran, me just ahead. I kept my lead the whole way, but I could feel his ragged breathing almost on my neck. When I reached the lobby, luck finally turned in my favor. I heard a loud crash, followed by a muffled scream. He'd tripped on the wet steps. The fog had left everything damp. I didn't stop to look. I shoulder-charged the side door, ran straight to my truck, and hit the remote button to unlock the doors and start the engine. I jumped in, threw it in reverse, and in the rearview mirror, I saw him, dressed in head-to-toe in black, wearing a waterproof cloak and a featureless black mask, bursting out of the building, sprinting towards me. I floored the accelerator. The tires skidded on the wet dirt as I hit the dirt road. It wasn't until I was nearly 8 kilometers away, close to the highway, that my phone finally got a signal. I immediately called the police. They arrived in 15 minutes.
I went back with them to the depot. I told them everything that had happened and filled out reports for both the company and the authorities. We searched the entire building, the basement, the roof, the surroundings. Nothing. But on the stairs, we found something.
Lying between the steps, partially covered in mud, was a military shortwave radio, still warm to the touch, tuned to an encrypted frequency. The battery was fully charged, and attached to the strap was an access card bearing the logo of a government agency I'd never seen before. To this day, no one has explained why someone would break into that abandoned depot. There was nothing of apparent value there, just obsolete equipment and sealed crates. But the fact that they had the code, the military radio, and the mask, that still haunts me. Whatever their reason, I know one thing for sure. That night, running was the only right decision I made. I used to work as a night security guard at an interstate bus terminal in Delaware. It was an old brick building with high ceilings and cracked plastic benches. During the day, it was chaotic. People rushing around, speakers crackling, suitcases dragging across the floor. But at night, after the last departure, the place turned into a tomb, empty, cold, and silent. That's why that night remains etched in my mind with disturbing clarity and still haunts me to this day. It all started around 1 a.m. after the last staff member had left and I was the only living soul in the main lobby. Just me, the low hum of the lighting panels, and the bluish glow of the security monitors. My job was simple: check the cameras, do rounds every hour and a half, log any anomalies, and, above all, keep my eyes open for any suspicious movement. That night, I was watching the screens: lobby, restrooms, baggage area, outdoor parking, when I noticed a figure standing near the lockers on the East Corridor camera. That immediately caught my attention. No one should have been there. The terminal closed at 11 p.m., and all passengers had left. Only staff with special badges had nighttime access, and I knew no one was scheduled. At first I thought maybe it was a homeless person who'd hidden before closing. But he didn't look lost or desperate. He wore a dark brown overcoat, frayed at the edges, and stood completely still, facing away from the camera, as if waiting for someone or something. There was something about his posture, too rigid, almost unnatural, that gave me chills. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it wasn't a coincidence. I called my supervisor and described what I saw. He told me to stay at my post and keep watching. I did, but my gut screamed at me to go down and check in person. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the East Corridor. The walk felt endless. Every step echoed on the ceramic floor, and the silence was so thick it felt suffocating. When I reached the spot, I swept the corridor with my flashlight. Completely empty. No sound, no shadow, no sign of movement. I shouted, "Hello? Security here!" Only the echo answered. I walked slowly between the lockers, lighting every corner, every crack. Nothing. I started to think I'd imagined it. Maybe a reflection, a camera glitch, or just fatigue talking. I returned to the lobby, relieved but uneasy. As soon as I sat down and looked back at the monitors, there he was, exactly in the same spot, facing away, motionless, as if he'd never moved.
My stomach turned. I just personally searched that corridor. There was no way he could be there without me seeing him, unless he'd been watching me while I looked for him. I called my supervisor again, this time with a tighter voice. He repeated, "Don't approach. Wait for backup." Easier said than done, because I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. My imagination was already conjuring terrifying scenarios. Over the next 20 minutes, I watched as he slowly turned and began walking toward the staircase leading to the mezzanine, where the administrative offices were. He moved calmly, stopping occasionally, as if listening for something. Then he disappeared from the camera before reaching the door.
That made me even more tense. I checked all the other cameras, lobby, restrooms, emergency exits, even the cleaning supply closet. Nothing. How had he vanished so quickly? It was impossible. I started to suspect he knew the building better than I did, or that he wasn't alone. I sat there, heart racing, until I heard the elevator descending. The doors opened in the lobby. It was empty. But on the floor, right in front of the doors, were wet footprints, as if someone had walked barefoot through a puddle. Bare feet, in the middle of winter, on a freezing floor. I froze. If he was already inside the building, he could be anywhere. Every locked restroom, every supply closet, every dark corner was a hiding place. I immediately called the external patrol. I thought about locking myself in the booth, but something inside me insisted I needed to confirm it with my own eyes. In hindsight, it was a mistake. I took the elevator up to the mezzanine and started walking down the office corridor, flashlight in hand, checking every door. Every creak of the building made me jump. Halfway down the hall, I saw one of the doors was ajar, which shouldn't have happened since they all locked automatically at midnight. I pushed the door open with my flashlight and looked inside. The office was empty, except for a lit desk lamp and a chair tipped on its side. Nothing else. I stepped back into the corridor and froze. I heard footsteps behind me. They weren't mine. They were slow, wet, deliberate, coming toward me. My heart pounded. I swung the flashlight around and for a brief instant saw the brown overcoat at the far end of the corridor. He wasn't running. He walked with purpose, as if he knew exactly where I was. That's when I understood. He'd been following me from the lobby, hiding every time I checked the cameras. I bolted toward the emergency stairwell, took 3 flights of stairs at once, and slammed the door shut. The footsteps stopped immediately upstairs. I stood there, gasping, trembling, trying to convince myself it was just paranoia. But the sound of those footsteps still echoed in my head, as if they were inside it. When the patrol arrived, I was pale, cold sweating, nearly voiceless. We searched the terminal together, floor by floor, room by room. The east corridor was empty. No footprints, no evidence. And when we reviewed the recordings, we discovered the segment where he appeared had been corrupted. A blank stretch, as if it had never existed. I quit that job 2 weeks later. Partly because of the constant fear. Partly because I couldn't stand hearing the terminal's silence at night anymore. Especially when the wind rattled the windows and the speakers crackled. Because every sound, every shadow reminded me of him, standing in that corridor, always facing away, always waiting. Even years later, I still avoid bus terminals at night. I still double-check empty hallways, dreading the sight of that overcoat turning a corner, or hearing those wet footsteps behind me again. I know it wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a hallucination. It was someone real. Someone who knew how to move without being seen. And the thought that he was in there, watching me, hidden just beyond my sight, and that I may never know why he chose that place on that night, is something that still haunts me every time I remember that motionless overcoat in the empty corridor.